Good day everyone, and welcome to another creative episode. Thank you all for joining me. Absolute pleasure to be with you and my absolute joy to create these videos for you. In today's episode, what I will be doing is taking you through the contour process. Now, I'm also going to add some of the commentary with the painting process just to give you a more of an inside feel of what happens and what I do when I paint. Firstly, I wanted to thank everybody for participating in the community quiz that I put up, and the two questions that I asked was, why do you paint and why don't you paint? And I cannot begin to tell you how appreciative I am of your honesty and of letting me know what you are up to or where you're up to in terms of why you do or don't paint. So I wanted to address that briefly and give you some of my anecdotes. So the first, or actually let me put up the screenshot. The voting for why you do not paint, 44% have a fear of failure, which is quite interesting. 33% are too busy, and 11% split equally don't have a good art group for encouragement and or feel that they are too old, and the other category wasn't voted on at all. So I found that quite interesting, and let me be the first one to tell you that the fear of failure was equally one of my most biggest hurdles to go through. How I overcame that really is a lot of internal work, a lot of reading, a lot of doing actually, and a lot of putting myself out there. And what I realized is people are equally as fearful of what you think you are. So I made sure that I moved past that challenge. But let me give you some concrete examples. I've made some notes too, so by the way, just bear with me. Now, fear of failure is something that everybody has. Absolutely everybody has. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I want you to know that you are not alone in this whole process. I also want you to understand this statement. Fearing what others think and failure are linked. So fearing what others think about us and failure are linked. They actually walk together side by side. You are not a mistake if you do make a mistake, and this is one of the things that we probably haven't been taught a lot of. Just because you make a mistake does not mean that you are a defect. It really is a learning process. And I want everyone to know that not to define yourself by any mistakes. This is really, really important. Understand also that the more you shine your light, the more you put yourself out there, the more you will trigger other people's shadows. And this isn't a reason that if someone comes at you to stop, but simply the reason why you trigger somebody else is because on a deep level, they want to be where you're at, but simply don't have the courage or perhaps not sure how to get to that process. And the only way for them to process your light or what they're witnessing is to have a go at you. So please don't be discouraged if someone does come up to you and says, oh, well, I don't think you're good at all. This fear of failure is most prominent when we decide to go out and paint in public, plein air painting or plein air sketching, because we almost want to keep in our little cocoon and say, you know, I'm just quickly going to sketch, but don't come past me because I'm really crap and I don't want you to see what I'm doing. That's when that fear of failure comes through at its height. Also, fear of failure is when you're putting yourself out there, just like I am right now, but I certainly had to learn to move past that very, very quickly, because we all carry scars and nobody's perfect, let me put it that way. So understand that you shining your light, you will trigger other people's shadows, but that does not mean that you are a defect. These are their reactions. These are not something that you have to fix within them. Creativity takes courage. Okay, that's the first thing that you have to embed. To be on this adventure, well, for me, this is priceless. You can live a very subdued, quiet life. Not that art is anything to be, it's not an adrenaline sport in my opinion, but certainly does take a lot of courage to put yourself out into the criticism of the public arena, but never shy away of who you truly are. Individuals who are giving it a go, who are creating, who are diligently through discipline every single day giving it their 100% go, these people will never ever criticize you, because these individuals know what it takes to create. They know what it takes to put yourself out there. In fact, they will be the first to say, well done you. And if you can find an individual like that within your art group, within your social, within a family, within your work colleagues, please let them know where you're at and just get them to give you some guidance, because no one that's in the process of expanding and amplifying and igniting more of their creativity is going to criticize you. A weak person will, but again, remember, that's not for you to fix that type of an individual. Each time you paint, every single time you pick up a brush, you move past a hurdle, you move past an obstacle, and it is teaching you in different ways how to be, how to feel, how to stand, how to walk, how to talk, how to exude your strength and confidence, and above all, of course, how to paint. These are nuggets, these are brilliant obstacles to be cherished, because it's when you fail, when you fall, when you stumble that you learn the most. So never fear that type of failure. People who might criticize you or laugh at you, really from an economic standpoint, they have defined what success is. And this is why I encourage you in other videos to define your own success, because when you walk, when you march to the beat of your drum, it doesn't matter what anybody else around you defines success as. You will not be bothered by that, because you know why you do what you do and how you do what you do. So that's quite important. Last but not least, this fear of failure is shrouded in too much external voices. I want to leave you with this very powerful seed that exists in every single one of us. It's called an intention. There is an incredibly strong creative intention that exists in every single individual. And the best way to explain what that is by sharing with you the story of the acorn. Now, an acorn is a small seed, and its intention is huge. If you place or plant an acorn in a small pot, it will not be able to grow to its potential, because you see, the intention of the acorn that it holds is that of a 10, 20, 30 meter tree. But if you plant that acorn in a pot, it will grow as big as that pot. When you plant the acorn in the ground, it will reach its full potential. So know that same intention is within you. And if you stifle that intention within you, you will only grow in small increments. If you allow your full self to be planted within the deepest of soils, of rich soils, you will bloom in your most authentic self. So please do not fear failure. It is nothing to fear. It is simply a word. I encourage you to trust yourself and to walk and talk your authentic, unique self. Okay, so 33% of you voted, I'm too busy. Work and family is simply taking over my time, and that's some of the reasons, or the biggest reason, besides fear of failure, that I am not able to paint. I can certainly relate to having multiple spinning plates, and can completely understand that, you just can't give more of yourself. I truly do understand that. I wanted to share some of the anecdotes, and certainly the stories that you hear right now are some of the examples that I went through, and if they do help you, by all means take the nuggets and incorporate them as you see fit. But I just want to say to everybody that I absolutely know wholeheartedly what it means when someone says I'm too busy, not to mention exhausted. So, for example, at one point I worked in the world of finance, and I pretty much traveled 5 days out of 7, worked roughly about 40 to 45 hour weeks. That's of course not including travel. And in that time, this was, by the way, travel both domestic and some international. And if anyone that has known what it is to travel and live out of a suitcase, it is the least glamorous life, let me tell you. But at that time, because I spent most of my time either in a car or in some kind of a vehicle, I decided to purchase what was back then, mind you, an incredibly sophisticated piece of machinery, which was the smallest Canon camera. And by the way, this is not a plug for Canon, but it was quite small that I'd be able to hold it in my hand and quickly take photographs. It did its job, like I was surprised. And basically I immersed myself into the most smallest creative minutes and seconds that I could muster outside of my work environment. When I would go back into my hotel, I would then spend time looking through these creative photos. I would do some small sketches. At times, if weight permitting, I would bring some books with me, which aided in my, giving me that creative mindset. I spent a lot of time reading and learning from different artists via books and reverse engineering their painting process. I really have a brain like a puzzle, which is why I'm fascinated with reverse engineering other people's art practices. But I spent a lot of time looking at how they would paint and how is it that I would incorporate that process into my signature painting style. So yes, I understand too busy is absolutely a real thing. My encouragement with all of that is carve out even the smallest of opportunities. Feeding your creative soul is very important. I can't even begin to describe to you the importance of that. It feeds you, it nourishes you, it gives you energy beyond the 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I understand what it is, but certainly carve out as much as you can. Another example of too busy and nearly giving up is when I received a scholarship. I had to produce approximately 60 artworks within a span of about 7 months. And all the while I had the largest health challenge to deal with, something that I think would have broken a lot of people. I pretty much had to fulfill and honor that scholarship, and I couldn't put on the back burner. So with any challenge in life, I decided, how you going to eat an elephant, as the saying goes. I decided to pretty much take out a chunk at a time. And in a weird way, producing that art really did save me and really did give me hope and faith to see the end. So it was kind of like a blessing in a strange way. But certainly it would have been an easy opportunity for most people to have given up in that situation. Life can be challenging. I can say that with first-hand experience, but I found that you can either keep sitting in that challenge and basically let it eat you alive, or as the saying goes, the best way to move through a fire without burning is to just keep on walking forward. Otherwise, if you do stop, metaphorically speaking, that fire will engulf you. So there is no, rule here or no map that's going to work for, or the same map that's going to work for everybody, that's going to be the same. You know your life, you know exactly what you have to do, but certainly don't give up on you. One other example is for anyone that is interested, I actually get up quite early in the morning to carve out my own personal time, and that sometimes can be about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but generally between 4:30 and 5 I get up every morning and I spend time with me. Now that's become really important at this point because that sets me up for the whole day. Which means, of course, well, what does that mean for the night before is that I don't have late nights, and I certainly don't overwhelm my system, both physical food or mental exertion, just so that I'm able to get a good enough sleep and start my day on the right foot. So being too busy, as I've learned, is one thing, but changing our perception of what that is and changing our daily routine can certainly carve out some type of creative and joyful moment that doesn't include doing things that we have to do. The other 11% was around I'm too old, or I don't have a group that is encouraging regarding art. Now, I want to say that most of the classes when I started years and years ago, perhaps decades now, they were filled with individuals at that time who were 50 years plus. In fact, I was probably one of the most youngest students there, and I truly did carve out every single moment that I could to attend these classes, and I was equally impressed how many other individuals did the same, and some of them were still working in their 50s, others who were older, retired, but they certainly made the time to be there. One of the classes also then that I started later on, which took some time and it took a bit of convincing, you would have heard me talk about the men's shed in other videos. These were classes that the average age of the student was around 65 years old, and I believe a couple might have been in their late 70s. Don't hold me to that. But this was an incredible class that, you know, at the surface, you would have said, what's the point? But I knew the power of art, and I knew the power of getting their minds into the creative mode. Yes, we had some challenges in the beginning. Yes, they didn't want to do certain things and paint certain subjects because they were difficult. But the funny part is that a year later, after every single week doing a class, they, you know, the way that these beautiful men expanded and grew was unprecedented. They went on to have their own art exhibitions. They were part of their town's annual festivities. They took part in the annual open art studio. So for someone to say that, you know, I'm too old, I think again it's just a mindset. You could start to create at any age. It doesn't really have to have a limit at all. And I wanted to share with you some wonderful female art creators, not necessarily artists, that have started late in life to pursue their dreams. Louise Hay, and I don't know if you're familiar with Louise Hay, she was 65 years old when she started her own publishing company called Hay House Publishing. Susan Wright, 58 years old. She started Eco Republic in the UK. Karen Stubbings, 51 years old, started the Wood Pirate in Derbyshire in the UK. Anita Mahaffrey, 61 years old, started Cool Jams, which is basically pajamas, in San Diego. Your age has something that most people don't have, and that is life experience. So whilst it's easy for every single one of us to say I'm too old, I want to encourage you that that statement isn't truly how you feel. It's rather perhaps maybe that you don't want to put yourself out there for other reasons, but your age, with all my heart, I can tell you, is really not a barrier. In Anita Mahaffrey's words, I want to say, use your life experience and do something great. Life experience is something that cannot be bought, but has to be lived. I can also relate about not having a good art group, and I can tell you honestly that it was a search back in the time when, about 20 years ago, when I started wanting to paint with a group. I not only worked those 45 hours a week, but it meant that now I had to find not only the artists that were holding art workshops, but most of them were holding art workshops that were outside of the city, which meant that I had to travel 2 hours one way, 2 hours back. So that was 4 hours on the road after spending a whole day with them, and to do it all over again the next day, purely because it was a budget thing, and also I had to be back home so I can start work the next day and not be late for work. So no matter what your challenges are, there's always a workaround. There really is always a workaround, and I wholeheartedly encourage you to, you know, feed your creative souls. I know we're all busy, and I know we all have our fears, but truly the reward is priceless, in my opinion. If you truly don't have an art group that you can connect with, I encourage you to go on YouTube, find different type of artists. Not everybody on this channel will align with the way I paint, and that's okay. I went to so many different tutors, I read so many different books, because every single person has got something to teach you, something to give you. And the online art community at this point in time, I think, are absolutely priceless. You can watch someone's process in the comfortability of your own home, go into your studio and learn how to paint, come back, rewatch something, go and do it again. So the opportunities for us to grow where we are right now, I think it's limitless, truly, truly limitless, and your creative power is boundless, so don't waste that. Yes, it's nice to be with people, and if you really want to, bring some of your artworks after you've completed them in the studio and go into a park and put a couple on a bench. See who's going to come over. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to tell you you're crap. Believe me, they won't. Most people that come to you will say, I wish I could do what you do. I overcame that fear when I decided that enough was enough. I took myself to overcome this fear, and I placed myself in a very busy park. I never forget it. I had a family walk past through the back of me. I was sketching, looking at a subject, and they said, look, a real artist. I chuckled. Inside, I chuckled, because I thought, if they only knew how much I was sweating on the inside, and I'll put myself out there for this public display of criticism, and yet I heard the most encouraging statement ever. So like I said, put yourself out there. You'll be surprised how many people want to do what you do. And so, yeah, don't fear failure. Okay, so let's head on to and have a look at how to contour this easy, seemingly easy still life. Now, the painting process. Now, I've condensed the painting process into 15 minutes. How to paint with the knife would have been something that I've done a 3-day workshop on a still life, on landscape, and on portraiture. So I've covered as much as I could in a small 15-minute session to give you as many nuggets as I could, but certainly there's so much more, so many other smaller nuances that are part of this process, as you can appreciate, but hoping that the 15 minutes here, wet into wet, knife technique, color mixing, will give you enough information. In terms of tools and what you need to do, have the appropriate palette knife. With this particular art process, of course, you all know I would have used, I'm going to try to get that for you, I would have used my favorite palette knife here, which has a very, very flexible, let's just get that to the front, there we go, a very flexible tip. And for me, that's just, you know, it's gold, really. Someone actually asked me, sent me a DM to say what type of a knife is this, and its brand is called Art Basics, and it's I think it's an Australian brand, I'm not quite sure, but there's a number on it that says it's 1018. Certainly you can buy different brands, but this particular brand is Art Basics. It retailed, or when I bought it a couple of years ago, for $8.20. That's $8 Australian. I don't even want to tell you what they retail for now, but some of them I've seen for $20, which is ridiculous. But anyway, having the right tool for this particular process is important. So don't go and, you know, attempt to get a palette knife that is rigid and thicker and longer. It's just not going to work, and you'll see that as we go along. If you're going to do this at home, choose a simple subject. So get a small white round cup. That will give you the opportunity to work with the knife and learn how to move it. And remember, it is a figure 8 movement. It doesn't look like that on camera, purely because, you know, I don't have a slow motion camera to capture that for you, but certainly it's a slow movement. I wanted to give you a white contour demonstration for 2 reasons. Firstly, working with white is quite challenging. It's almost like having the mindset to paint in a monochromatic perspective. And white is a tough value because you need to have a very deep understanding of color mixing in order to hold the values quite tight next to one another. That will then give you that round feel. Basically, you'll have your subject matter become 3D on a one-dimensional piece of paper. And to do that, you must be able to learn to mix your color values quite tightly together. Essentially, I encourage everyone to practice on your palette board. Mix, 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 mix. And you'll see me as I'm painting, whilst I don't spend a lot of time showing you that, I really do paint and mix color on the board first before I put it on there. Yes, eventually when you have experience, you'd be able to, slap on the paint or slap on quickly, but you really need to mix and learn how to mix color. Very, very important. Again, I'll be narrating through the process so that you have a deeper understanding into what I'm thinking and how I'm working, and to show you what's happening on the inside, how that translates on the outside, if that makes sense. So again, I thank you for choosing to stay with me in this video today and for watching it. Enjoy the process. Please do let me know if there are any questions, and certainly make some notes. And if you do have questions, comment them in the video below, and I'll do my best to give you the details for your process and hopefully encourage you on your art journey. Okay, enjoy. Know your subject matter. While I do take a photograph of my subject, I find that knowing the contour of the item I'm painting is a key step. This is why for me photos are a reference guide only, and I don't adhere to painting a photo very faithfully. Running your fingers along the ridgeline provides you with a perspective. You are training your brain to know the direction of the palette knife movement. So familiarize yourself with your painting subject. Once you begin putting paint on canvas, your brain will have a reference point to adhere to. Just a painting reminder that with any oil paintings, you paint from the background to the foreground. Now, of course, the reason for this is that if you were to paint flowers first and then the white portion of the vase, the flowers will look like they've been carved into the paint versus sit on top of the porcelain. And as you can see here, notice that as I'm painting the background, I really don't give a lot of consideration that I am moving over that flower pattern. And also I am very conscious of utilizing the palette to follow the contour of the vase. Notice now in this last portion, as I'm beginning to finalize the painting, I'm now placing the blue flowers on top of the white background, because the flowers, of course, are part of the foreground. And this adds to giving the vase that 3D effect, so it doesn't look like it's been carved in, but in fact the flowers are sitting on top of the porcelain. You'll be able to see this process as I go through the painting and hopefully give you a better understanding of what it looks like. Okay, so let's get into it. This is the block in stage. Establish your darkest value is key. Your lights will definitely stand out if we put in the darkest darks. At this stage, I'm not too worried if I go over some flowers, as I mentioned. It really isn't a concern, but I will outline them just to make sure that I have a good foundation in comparing values. Note how I follow the curvature of the vase, even with the brush as I block in the color. This is your clue how the palette knife will also move. Now, things to keep in mind when painting white subjects: keep your dark values in the warm green grey value. I also keep my canvas quite wet, or the paint on there is wet, which allows me to manipulate the edges. The light direction for this subject is from the left hand side towards the right, so that means our lightest lights will be on the left hand side, and it's imperative to be able to create a 3D object when we understand where our light and darks are coming from. Otherwise the image is going to look quite flat as we progress to paint it. Note the darkest value compared to the white tissue paper. Don't be scared of getting your darkest values in. You can always go lighter if needed, which in this case I'm going to slowly build and lighten each layer. Even though this is a preliminary layer, I spend time getting the color values right so that my confidence with the palette knife doesn't deviate. I don't rush this process, even if it's only the initial layer. Truth be told, I spent a lot of time mixing color because I do enjoy discovering color, and I love the feeling of creating new tones and new values. Getting the color right on your board will allow the values to sit much better on your canvas. I've blocked in my first color layer. Now I'm adding the first layer of blue using a small brush, which, remember, flowers sit on top of the white porcelain, so this is not the final layer. The purpose is to have a reference for the second lighter layer of the vase, which I'm going to begin with the palette knife. Here I'm beginning the palette knife stage, connecting with the emotional process, how the knife moves, and keeping the shape integrity of our subject. Of course, it's really important to maintain that focus on your curve and the soft edges of your subject. The thing to remember is to maintain the curvature. I cannot emphasize that enough. Again, I'm not too concerned if I go over any of the flowers. Remember, we are painting from background to foreground, and the flowers are part of the foreground, thus to be painted last. Also note, in this section, I'm shifting the color value to a lighter value. Again, if your darkest darks are not present, the light would not be able to stand out. So make sure that the first blocking layer has your darkest value. It will act as a great compass and a great guide to begin to lighten up your stages that you're painting. The knife movements are quite small and they look like I'm dabbing the paint on, when in fact it's the figure 8 movement I've talked about that I'm applying to each section. I do make it a point to make sure that the values relate to one another really well. And as you can see on the right hand side, there is a slight change in value, and it's a little bit darker, although lighter from what's underneath, but darker to what's in the middle of the vase. Here I'm moving into the second knife layer and into a lighter third value. Again, having other layers wet for me, it's really important because I'm able to manipulate the edges and almost feel like I'm sculpting a vase on a piece of paper and bringing it from a one dimension into a third dimension. Again, keep note of the way that the palette knife is moving. Just as I indicated at the beginning of this video, I'm following the contours of the vase and making sure that I angle my knife so that it follows those contours of the vase. And again, it's purely to be able to add to the effect of the vase looking like it's, a 3D image on a one-dimensional piece of paper. Notice the movement of the knife is following the curvature of the object. I'm also varying the direction of the knife while maintaining the edges so that the area isn't monotonous and stale. The values in this subject are quite close, so having a somewhat advanced knowledge of color and mixing is beneficial. However, do not get discouraged. This is just brush mileage. And with time in your studio and daily practice, you can upgrade your mixing knowledge in no time. Now I'm placing the lightest value and continuing to build up the layers. This isn't my final lightest value. Remember, each value acts as a reference point. In this case, this will be my reference point before I add the final highlights. At this stage, I'm cleaning up each value. Each time I add a new tone, I need to make sure that they are in cohesive harmony. Notice how the vase is beginning to now take shape of a feel of porcelain, and to me this is really two reasons. Mainly, one, keeping those values close together, and second, integrating cool and warm tones. Now, the cool and warm value discussion is another topic for another time, but again, this is the other big factor of why these such tightly close-knit colors work together, is because whilst we've got one color value, so to speak, there's a color value of a warm and a cool value that again I'm able to now create and make this subject appear like as it's a 3D subject on a one-dimensional piece of paper. Here at this stage, I am reinstating the flowers. Again, they act as a guide in correcting my values. I'm also interested how the pattern behaves when it is integrated into this section of the paint. I find the pattern of the subject in real life doesn't always translate into the painting, so I'm wanting to reinstate it so that I can correct it further down the line once I finish the painting. For most artists, this might be a tedious painting process. Remember, your technique is yours alone. This is your authentic signature. Learn how to mix color and you are already halfway there. For me, mixing and rediscovering color is the joy. For me, it isn't about just painting, but about the integration of emotions toward that which I am painting. Plus, this is really my process where I'm able to achieve that butter effect that looks like a detailed stroke, yet not really, if that makes sense. This is the last process of my lightest value. Basically, it is my home stretch, starting with the light background, white values, and lastly finishing the flowers in the foreground. I'll finish up my commentary here and leave you to watch the final process.